So let's move on to the second one, which would be the place, the jurisdiction, and let's talk about Finland. I imagine, Carl, you'd like talking about your home country. What I did notice, though, of what I've been noticing recently, is that there's some Scandinavian. You're not gonna like it, me putting it all under the same umbrella, I guess. But I've been noticing some Scandinavian countries, like Denmark specifically. They recently got a political election that's not particularly pro mining. That's, to put it mildly, on their side, but that's already hurt a few companies over there, as they control Greenland too, in a way. So how's the political situation in Finland right now towards mining, Carl?
Well, actually, I haven't, to briefly comment on your previous point, I haven't really focused on Denmark at all. From our perspective, it's mostly Finland, Sweden, and Norway. And I do think that Finland differs quite significantly from Sweden and Norway in the way that it's easy to get official permits in all the three countries, Finland, Sweden, and Norway. But in reality, you do need to have a permit from the municipal government in Sweden and Norway, and also from the Sami people. In Finland, when you get a permit, you actually have the right to explore. And in reality, it's much easier to do exploration in Finland. We've had major partners in Magnus who came first to Norway and then to Sweden, and a few years later to Finland, and said that, okay, like this is how it works. Like we'll never go back to Norway again, because it's significantly more difficult to actually explore there in reality.
Okay. Yeah.
There are good companies. There's a few things that advance there as well. But Finland's been also, in the past 10 years, we've ranked #1 in the Fraser Institute study, and we are in the top 10 pretty much always. Yep. Finland's been 4 times in the row out of 185 countries, the happiest country on the planet. We're not that happy, but that's what the polls show. And so, like, it is extremely stable in a way. Naturally, there's discussion. In Finland, exploration is really a sort of niche business, like your everyday Finn. They don't know too much about mining or exploration, but in general, it's very favorable.
Carl, I think it's also true. I've traveled with Carl quite a bit in Finland. We often get on the train in the south, for instance, Antonio, and take the overnight train to the north. It's a beautiful. Carl can drive his vehicle on in Tampere, where he lives, and take his vehicle off when we arrive in Rovaniemi in the Arctic and go to the project. It's fantastic. You know how the European trains are, really nice for an American to experience that. But Carl, isn't it fair to say too that much like in Canada, when you're close by to Helsinki or you're in the south, in the urbanized south, people would sort of out of sight, out of mind. They wouldn't be aware of mining. It's much less important in their life, even though they need the lights to work when they turn the light switch on, or the power plant to be able to produce energy, but the many other reasons they need their resources. But when you're in the north, you're remote, lower population density, and people, it's more relevant in their life. And I think that's analogous to Canada, Australia, and other places too, is it not?
Yeah, very, very much so. And if you think about, for instance, the comparatively recent development within the EU and how many regions of the world want to be sort of more self-sufficient in materials. If you want to exaggerate a little bit, the EU sort of says that, well, we should be self-sufficient in 27, 28 elements, and effectively the Scandinavian countries should produce those. Obviously, there's other places in Europe like Spain and Portugal and well, many countries, but in reality, like Patrick, you just said, the population is quite sparse in northern Finland, Sweden, Norway, and it's much more like doable to mine there. It's the majority is forest and wilderness and so on.
Okay, that makes sense, gentlemen.
Even though there's effectively a road pretty much everywhere based on the industrial forestry, so there's really, really excellent infrastructure in general throughout the country.
I don't think that's true because Santa Claus always takes his sleigh, right? I mean, he doesn't use roads, so why is that? No, I'm kidding, of course. Yeah, gentlemen, this sounds great. You used to be number one on the Fraser Institute of Mining survey you had a score of close to 100. I think Idaho got a score of 100 last year in 2020, but you still have a score of Finland still has a score of 99 point something. So it's it's one of the best jurisdictions according to that survey. But everything has its price. Everything, I guess, has its drawbacks. So is it expensive to explore in Finland relative to, say, Canada or Australia? How does it measure up against those, more famous jurisdictions, or Idaho, which moved you out of the first place?
People normally say that it's not cheap to explore in Finland, but I would say that it's a bit cheaper than in Canada and in Australia in general. And one reason is that the infrastructure is bar none. There's roads everywhere. There's 6 international airports north of the Polar Circle. It's truly stunning, and Finns who haven't traveled that much sort of completely miss it. And there's a number of other sort of interesting statistics about Finland. We have the lowest infant mortality rate on the planet, highest literacy rate on the planet, and so on. So there's a lot of good things in Finland, even though many Finns are sort of unaware of those and are a bit gloomy and so on. But as said, we are 4 times in the row the happiest country also on the planet. So
it's always important, Antonio, when comparing these things, to compare apples to apples. So look at the latitude first. The minerals are where we find them. So this particular endowed greenstone belt with a lot of gold is north of the Arctic Circle. So then if you take that latitude across to Canada or Russia, you'll find much better, US included in Alaska, you'll find much better infrastructure here and access to that latitude. Direct drilling costs, Antonio, considerably less to drill core in Finland than in Idaho. I've got firsthand experience with that recently. So, of course, there are the cost tax-wise and what have you in Finland of that incredible infrastructure. But then,
the corporate tax is only 20%.
Yeah, but the corporate tax, of course, is excellent. So there is a cost of living, and that quality of life comes at a price. But when we consider all the variables, personal health and safety, our ability to execute our program, helicopters having to sling your drills everywhere, such as in northern Canada, this is a huge, huge advantage. So all these things generally come out, and you certainly Finland would not stand out globally as extraordinarily expensive, all things considered. Absolutely not.
Okay, yeah. Well, I like that you're mentioning the sort of the tax. Why I asked that question specifically about the prices, because I also read something about a royalty or a fee that has to be paid to the landowner in Finland to drill their ground. And then also to mine it, you have to pay more. And then to sell the metal, it's an even higher royalty. What's the situation there?
There's a landowner compensation when you do exploration. It's 20 euros per hectare. The royalty, when you start to mine, it's 0.15%. So it's comparatively, it's not terribly high. And that goes to the landowner. That's one of the major difference between Finland and Sweden and Norway. In Sweden and Norway, the compensation goes to the government. In Finland, the compensation goes 100% to the landowner. So that's why you get, in reality, 97-98% of landowners are really eager that you do exploration on their ground. They do get compensation for it. And the royalty, 0.15%, goes to the landowner. And there's also a sort of political, there's a party in Finland, Center Party, which is, it's for the sort of landowners and farmers and so on. So there's a lot of has to do with the Center Party in Finland. I think that it's much more doable to do exploration and mining in Finland in reality, all the way to mining as in some of the other, in Scandinavian countries.
Think about the power of that, Antonio. In the U.S., we pay in the Western U.S., with which people are familiar, Nevada, Idaho. If you're on federal land, there is a process, pretty transparent one, by which you can take a claim and explore there. The fees you pay are to the federal government. Of course, those dollars are very, very well used and always put to the most efficient use. And we Americans are so thrilled with where the U.S. government spends its money. But that money it's a very similar cost to taking an exploration permit in Finland, as Carl just said. But he's not lying. Every dollar goes to the surface landowner in that case. Think of the value you're getting by building that relationship, as opposed to writing a check to the federal government for the right and privilege to take all that risk and explore and try to add value to that barren desert ground in Nevada, for instance. Or to create jobs or whatever. So there's that. Also, royalties. You could say that when one mines on federal mining claims in the Western U.S., there's no royalty to the government per se. However, the ground is laced with royalties because we have a system in place where a previous owner can take a royalty and apply it to a successive owner. So there's lots of royalties on mining in the Western U.S. They just generally don't go to the government per se. Here we have a case of a 0.15% royalty in the case of Finland. So there is, in many ways, head and shoulders above a number of other Western countries in how it's managing its resources, its land, to incentivize exploration and discovery and integrate the relationship with the surface landowner, who may be a reindeer herder or a timber farmer, or the state, because the state has timberlands in abundance up there.
Okay, that does make sense. Thank you for that overview. And then, I agree with you, Patrick. The government uses its money really well. That's why you guys are struggling with inflation in all the wrong places, right? Because the government uses the money really well. But no, anyways, jokes aside, that it does make sense. I really hope to visit Finland one day. I love the cold and winter. I love the pictures that Carl has been sending me. It's just, I don't know, it's my thing. I just love the winter. But so, what?
Welcome anytime.
What's that?
Welcome anytime.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. And I was just reminded, looking at the notes that I took, talking about inflation. How's that over there? I know you guys import a lot of gas from Russia. Obviously, that's the case for a lot of European countries. So how's inflation been in Finland so far, and how is that influencing your expenses?
I haven't looking at the official inflation statistics. I have a background in industrial economics. I do think that there's better ways to sort of actually measure the actual cost of living.
But how have you been experiencing it? On the ground floor, have you seen, maybe talk to me about gas, about the diesel that you put in the trucks, so stuff like that. How have your expenses? Have you felt it in your pockets?
Nobody's effectively ever talked about it within the companies at all. It is what it is. When I talk with Patrick a few years ago, people are sort of shocked, we have $3, $4 gas per gallon in the US. We've had all the time $10 gas per gallon in Europe for the past generation. We can live with that. There's been 75% tax on gas in Finland in general. So yeah, Finland is in some respects heavily taxed. So gas costs €2 per liter, $10 per gallon. And out of that cost, roughly, I haven't checked in many years, but it's roughly 75% is a tax. And that's the way it's been for decades.
Okay.
And we can live with that.
Okay. Well, you know what? I mentioned Russia, and this makes me think, it's topical. We should probably talk about it. A lot of countries are dependent on Russia for raw materials. You guys are their next door neighbors. Have you had internal discussions as to how that could, what's happening right now? They're wanting to ban, they're banning their exports of raw materials until the end of 2022. Have you had internal discussions as to how that could influence the country as a whole, and maybe therefore your projects? Have you been thinking about hedging against it? What are you doing in that regard?
No and no. We're focusing on what we're doing on exploration 100%, and we see the likelihood of, or at least I see the likelihood of something major in Finland as comparatively low.
Okay.
Yeah, it's speaking as an American, I remember Putin making some remarks, about Sweden and Finland early on, and I remember just chuckling. I mean, Americans in general regard Scandinavia as close, allies in time of war and friends in time of peace. And even a President Biden would have a hard time not being highly supportive of any move in that direction. So we haven't really given it a thought, Antonio. The only person who's ever asked me that question was an American generalist investor who didn't know anything about the mining industry, who asked about, well, isn't Finland constantly under threat from the Russians? Well, the Russians didn't do so well the last time they went to Finland. So it was a fairly painful exercise for them. So it hadn't been something we worry about.
Okay. Yeah, well, I can see why somebody who doesn't know about anything about mining would ask you that question, because I'm one of those guys. I don't know much about it. So that's why I'm asking these questions. But here's a more mining related question. What about skilled labor? Because, according to some of the statistics, Finland isn't, as you Carl said, a particularly mining focused country, as the majority of your GDP comes from services and not much of it comes from gold mining specifically yet, I think. So do you have to fly in skilled labor from all across the globe, or what does your labor force look like right now?
Antonio, the thing I've observed about that factor, I mean, I've worked in, I don't know, something like 40 countries. And when you arrive in that jurisdiction and you look around, like Carl said, Finland had all the boxes ticked with education and literacy and a diversity of its economy, actually, a tech business. So there's high-tech industry, there's industrial. The quality of the industrial businesses in Finland is extraordinary. You should see our facilities, how well the buildings are built in the north, obviously to keep the cold out, all of that. So there's a skilled labor there. But Carl's been right on top of moving the services we need around. He's worked, for instance, with some local business folks who set up some service businesses that are working with us, who are literally out there training drillers, operators of new types of drill rigs. Carl had already laid that foundation in. So sure, when you're in the north, in any country, in the remote part of any country, you might need to move some labor force into that region, incentivize, go hunting for them, because people are relatively sparse in the north. So there's a little bit of that. But boy, it's truly international too. We've been able to move geologists across the EU, and we have a couple of geologists that come in from Czech. There's even a few young Americans who are working there. They even allow old Americans to go in and help out too. So it's really truly first world in every respect, and really truly a melting pot that way. But the local workforce, you just can't beat it. And you can argue about when we are rich first world nations, do we necessarily have the work ethic we all wish that our labor force had? Well, maybe not as much as we would have liked, but we're efficient, and the Finnish workers are efficient too. So it's a great blend of that labor force. I don't think you could be much better. And there is a mining. You mentioned gold. Gold is comparatively small in Finland so far. As we now know, there are only 2 multi-million ounce discoveries in all of Lapland. However, it's been a long known base metal mining country, and the crossover from base metal mining to gold is beautiful. So no worries there.
Okay, fair points. I like that. I like this overview. What I'm trying to look for here is sort of things that might limit you or prohibit you from delivering some of the results. That I like focusing on those things. And one thing that I could think of was the weather. You sort of get limited by the weather. I looked up the weather for Finland. For some of your projects, we're talking about really long, like 7+ months winter and rainy, muddy summers, basically. That's what the internet says, with really cold temperatures. And so in Lapland specifically, where you are, some months you don't even get to see the sun. That's what people are saying on the internet. So if you do you have to fly in? How does that work? Do you fly those people into work in the dark? Are they used to working there? Does that affect the efficiency by which they can work, and does make it more expensive for you to deliver results? Or how should I look at the whole weather situation? How should I look at that?
First of all, winter is in northern Finland the best time to work because a lot of the land is boggy, like maybe roughly a third of the land. So you can't effectively even drill in the summer because there might be swamps there. It does get comparatively dark in the winter, but there's sort of semi-daylight for even in the darkest month for a few hours. But effectively, people have the whatever they should be called flashlights. Like you can obviously have very strong lighting in general, and that's what you obviously do. So it's not a problem at all. On the contrary, and we can effectively, in some of the areas which are on elevated ground, we can drill 12 months per year above the polar circle. And in some areas which are boggy, we obviously can do drilling and bottom of till sampling, mapping, sampling, and so on in the summer. So we truly have two different seasons, the summer season and the winter season, and obviously spring and fall in between. And we've obviously laid out the plan so that we know each and every month what we're going to do. But the weather is not a problem in Finland at all. Okay, that's good.
For sure. Yeah, and some of us like the cold like you, Antonio, anyway. So I can tell you, I was there in November this past winter, and December the preceding winter. And each time we access drill sites without the need for a snow machine even. So you literally just drive right to the drill site. Sometimes you need a snow machine. Very, very, very rarely, FireFox has never needed a helicopter, for instance. So again, look at your apples to apples comparison, and quite good weather. Carl manages very well. There is about a month there where that 2 meters of snow is melting, and that does make things a bit slushy for that month while things melt. But even then, as Carl said, a couple of our projects have fully high ground. We could even work during the melt if we needed to. So look at those teams, that understand that. They employ local contractors instead of trying to bring a contractor from Florida or something to northern Finland. That might not work that well. But if you use a Finnish contractor for drilling or other earth moving or whatever, they're going to be very comfortable with it.
Oh yeah, you give him a hot Finnish sauna and a cold Finnish beer, he'll probably be happy to work there. I'm guessing. But jokes aside, though, gentlemen, you just said that you're trying to spread out your work across the months. You've not been super active on the news front as of late. Like, it's been about 2 months, I'd say, since you posted any news, and that sort of reminds me that